Welcome. Good to see you again here. My name is Isioma Utomi. I'm one of the chapter leaders for the Ellevate Entrepreneurs. We also have my fellow chapter leaders here. We have Crystal, we have Super Kate, and we have Catherine. Please wave, say hi.
Yay.
Excellent, excellent. And we have a very, very special guest today. We have the founder of 85 Broads, now known as Ellevate. So in case you did not know, somehow we have our founder here to chat with us, and we would love to give her a great welcome. Please say hi to her in the chat, everyone.
Thank you.
So Janet Hansen,
Yes.
welcome. So happy to have you here. And I know you're having a busy week. You were at Mobilize Women yesterday. So we're very grateful for your time. And so let's just kick off by talking about you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you started your career, and how you evolved into an entrepreneur?
Then that begs the obvious question, how much time do you have? Because when you're as old as I am, I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version. But first, I would just like to say it is always an extraordinary honor for me to participate in anything that this network is doing, but particularly anything around when the focus is on entrepreneurship. And my brain has not turned off since the summit yesterday. And I would be remiss not to give a massive shout out to the Ellevate team. It is a tiny team, as you gals know. And to put together an event like that, coordinate all the panelists and everybody showing up, the tech side, and making sure that everything works, I thought was just really extraordinary. And I think everybody knows pretty much what my story is. But I would frame it in a way today that I think is relevant to this panel. My mother, so I grew up one of three kids in a small town about a half hour north of New York City. And my mother had an opportunity to work for and do research for one of the most famous baby doctors at Yale University. She was very excited about this opportunity. And it didn't happen because her older sister, Marion, who was 4 years older than she was, this is kind of a sad story, or very sad. She had a nervous breakdown. She was at Wellesley. She had a nervous breakdown. And my mom's parents were afraid that if she went to graduate school, that this would be excruciatingly painful for Marion, because Marion had not finished undergraduate school. So my mother didn't go. And instead of going to do research, she ended up being Dr. Gazelle, who was this baby doctor, his secretary. When she was there, she met my dad, who had just come back from World War II. My dad was an officer in the US Navy at the age of 19. He fought in the Pacific during World War II, and that has special poignance for me today, this being D-Day, the 80th anniversary of D-Day. But the important part of this story is that my mother never had a career, and this was a great sadness. My dad graduated from Yale, and class of 1948 with George H.W. Bush. I mean, rah rah. And my mom, I think, was always very, very sad that she hadn't been able to pursue her dream, whatever that would have been. I suspect it would have been something in the area of child psychology. But the amazing thing was, because my mother never had a career, she could never give me any advice. And I was thinking about this a lot. because I have come to the conclusion after listening to so many brilliant panelists who were invited to speak yesterday because they are experts in their field. That is why they were on those panels. That the thought that came to me this morning was bad advice is worse than no advice. And because my mother had never had a career, she could never weigh in about my career decisions or lack thereof. She had plenty to say about my boyfriend selections, or what outfits I chose to wear, but she couldn't weigh in when it came to me making decisions about my future. And so after I graduated from the same college she went to, Wheaton College in Massachusetts, it was a women's college then, and it was still when I went there. I applied and was accepted to Columbia Business School. My parents both advised me not to go because they couldn't understand why do that. I mean, and they put an exclamation point on that by saying, we're not going to help you with your tuition, because they didn't see the value of pursuing a degree in business. So I took out tons of student loans and I went anyway. And, as they say, that was the beginning of an incredible ride that I had, because I went from Columbia Business School to Goldman Sachs, where I was for 11 years. At the end of 11 years, and this is all detailed in the book that I wrote that just came out a couple of months ago. I left, I got remarried, I had 2 kids in quick succession, and then I went back to Goldman Sachs. This was now 1991, because we didn't have any money, because I had never saved any money when I was at Goldman, figuring that and for good reason, figuring that I was going to be made a partner of the firm. So I went back to Goldman, and I was in asset management, which absolutely no one cared about. It was the one division that earned the most derision, if that's possible, that there was a division at Goldman Sachs that people said, why do we care about the asset management business? It is a non-starter, right? It's not who we are. But I learned from the experts, the top people in the division, about the mutual fund industry. And what dawned on me, because I figured out very quickly that my career was going absolutely nowhere, flatline, done. I was done at Goldman. I was never, ever, ever going to be able to regain the momentum that I had had in the first 11 years when I was in the in the big leagues. I was in sales and trading, institutional sales and trading in the real firm, not in the asset management division. I was never going to regain that momentum. And so in 3 years, I learned every single thing I could about the mutual fund industry. Then I left, and Jeff, my husband, and I launched Milestone Capital. And the amazing thing, and I think about this, it gave me shudders to think about yesterday when we were talking about at the close to the end of the day about the Fearless Fund, and that is now, they have ruled that they are discriminating by giving African-American women primarily grants. If that had been the case in 1994 when Milestone Capital was launched, I don't know what would have ever happened to me, because the whole premise of Milestone Capital was that we were the first, the only institutional money market fund in the United States owned and run and managed by a woman. And we went from 0 in assets to over 3.5 billion with a B. And we got there because we created a strategic partnership with Bear Stearns. They absolutely saw the value, the win-win. Why? Milestone Capital, we had 4 people, all ex-Goldman alums, right? And so took the best of Goldman out of Goldman, did it ourselves, wrapped it as a legitimate women-owned business, and succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. And then, after I said, okay, this is kind of like a laundromat, right? It just kind of runs itself. This was when 85 Broads was created, and I think everybody knows the whole story behind that. I think the one of the key takeaways really is about this story is, again, I didn't get any bad advice from anybody. I got no advice. And so I said, all right, I'm going to trust my gut. I was married to somebody who had come out of the Goldman Sachs culture. And so our skill sets complemented each other perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. What I had in sales and marketing, Jeff had in compliance and legal and accounting. And so it was an extraordinary ride. We then parlayed that into, or at least I did. I was hired to report directly to Joe Gregory, who was the president and COO of Lehman Brothers. And what was I there to do? It had nothing to do with Milestone Capital. They couldn't have cared less. I was actually hired to advise Joe Gregory on how to hire more brilliant women at Lehman Brothers. And so this renaissance, this was about a 10-year run, 1995 to 2005-06, was one of the most extraordinary periods of my lifetime, because anything seemed possible, anything. And we created a lot of incredibly cool concepts. This was not rocket science, but what we created was a co-mentoring program, right? Instead of senior, junior, co's. So all these gals who were joining 85 Broads, mostly from graduate and undergraduate school, they were my co-mentors, because I believed that I could learn as much from them as they could learn from me. And I always felt the deck was stacked in my favor, that I could learn more from them than they could learn from me. So I think the key takeaway is what made that time in history really so extraordinary. It was because we absolutely thought anything was possible. Anything was possible. I had the right partner, both in terms of, Jeff as a business partner, as my husband, as a parent. He was wonderful. And, we won't get into the real boo-hoo story of, at some point, 2006-07, Jeff decided that this was all a little too much for him. And so he left. And we didn't sort of get divorced the old-fashioned way. This wasn't sort of like, well, I don't like, how you leave your socks on the floor, or, toothbrush on the sink or anything like that. Jeff just literally left. And he vanished like left. And so for the last 18 years, I have been the only parent on deck. 18 years, the only parent that my son and daughter have had in their lives. And I think the relevance of this is that because I was an entrepreneur, and both of my kids are entrepreneurs, And, now I have more time on my hands. I realized yesterday, throughout the course of the summit, that I have to be extraordinarily careful about really understanding what the lines are, between being a mom and being an entrepreneur and more of a coach. And where I think this conversation will get very interesting today is I am not a certified coach. I have no background in coaching. And yet, that's what I think my job is, right? So the lines have blurred between me being mom and me being the person that advises both of my kids on their businesses. And what I am going to do as a result of the summit yesterday is take a big step back and really give a shout out to the people who have chosen coaching as a profession or have chosen anything as a profession and have an area, a body of work, an area of expertise. Because what made yesterday so impactful and so meaningful is that every single one of those people who spoke, everybody coming from a different point of view, were in their own way an expert. And I realized, that you can do more harm than good, in quote, weighing in. And it would be interesting to stop right there and really talk about, where do you get your advice? Who advises you? Right? And when you're an entrepreneur, getting good advice, sound advice, sage advice, the best advice is critical to whether your business succeeds or doesn't. And I got to tell you something, I would be fascinated to know, again, I thought I was super mom. I was a really good mom. I thought I was like really good, when my kids were younger. But now I think I have this exalted status, to continue to advise when I absolutely don't know what I'm talking about. But that doesn't stop me, right, from weighing in and thinking that my point of view matters. And my kids are so respectful that neither of them, neither my daughter Meredith or my son Chris, has ever said, "Mom, please shut up. Please stop talking." But it was breathtaking yesterday to realize, to say hats off, to really clap for people who have earned the right, to weigh in, who hopefully, are objective, and have the credentials, whether that's life or actual, certification or both, to advise somebody on how to run their business or whatever else it is that they're doing. So I would close by saying I was deeply humbled and reminded of how important it is, to be careful, be so careful, about how you advise somebody, particularly if you're weighing in on very weighty business decisions, how somebody runs their business, right? or the big idea. And what is going to get nuts, last thing quickly, what is going to make this really crazy is now we're going to have to start to thread in AI. Where does AI come in? Right. And so I thought my head was going to explode during the AI panel yesterday. But I think, that was very definitely my takeaway.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing that, Janet. There's like so much to touch on in your experiences. One thing I'll just say in the chat, so for everyone who's been listening, share where do you get your own advice from? I'm curious, just a quick one line, where do you typically get advice that you trust? I found it very interesting when you spoke about co-mentoring actually, and just how impactful it was for you as for those that you were working with. And I agree. And I think my personal opinion, honestly, is all knowledge is useful. All knowledge is helpful. I think knowing when to share it, I think is a very important life skill. I'm myself, I'm learning that in life. I will definitely say that in the age of AI, we need to have new benchmarks for what is ideal advice. A lot of AI also comes with biases. And that is something we definitely have to take in consideration. We can't just accept everything at face value. So I think there's now going to be even greater appeal, I think, for people who do have life expertise and training that can gauge things, can gauge situations, circumstances. I think that's quite important. So, but please weigh in on the chat where you get advice that you value. And one piece of advice I would like to get from you is, based on your experiences in your life, what advice would you give an entrepreneur about building resilience? How do you build resilience? You've been through quite a few things. What advice would you give for someone who is starting down the occasionally topsy-turvy road of entrepreneurship?
Janet, before you answer that, just
Margie.
allow me to tell everybody that I get my advice from Janet. So, you can take advice from Janet. And I've met both her children and they take her advice too. So mine comes from Janet. I've known her for 15 years. And you can take anything she tells you and put it in the bank because she's fabulous.
Well, thank you for that, Margie. And I think again, I'm probably more objective and smarter when I'm not acting in my parental role. So the question being resilience. My son, Chris, started a performance and protective eyewear company 4 years ago. He had no background in that. He just thought it was a great idea. And I have watched him mature over the last 4 years. Meredith is a solopreneur as an artist and as a designer. And it's so interesting to split screen my son, who has a business partner, so a co-founder, and my daughter who does not. And so my daughter is of counsel to herself. And she has made some very good decisions about business and jobs and opportunities, collaborations that she has taken on. And in others, she's made terrible decisions. She would say this herself. Chris has the luxury of having a co-founder and they are like tied at velcroed at the hip. And so what happens with Chris and his co-founder Jordan is that they keep each other, from probably doing a 1.5 off the roof, because it seems like they're in a customer service driven business. And anybody who is in a business where if you're an e-com or even if you're brick and mortar, right? Everybody, I think, really understands how absolutely challenging being client facing is, right? And I am astonished that Chris and Jordan can get through a day where they have so many people saying, well, I thought my eyewear was going to be delivered last, Friday. It got here the following Tuesday. I want this, I want that. I mean, this is so full on in your face every moment of every day. And yet they keep going. And Meredith, her resilience comes from the fact that she loves her thing is being an artist. That's what she was put on this earth to do. And so she draws great strength from having a business in an area that makes her happy. The clients she has sometimes are extremely demanding and many times, downright unfair. Or they were collaborations that weren't well thought out. But yet, if there's something that you feel is something that you value or you're creating value, then my guess is that is really the definition of resilience. I don't think that those things can ever really be separated. So, I would say, if somebody said, well, how did you stay resilient in the face of tremendous challenge and all kinds of things? And I think everybody has to ask themselves that question, because on any given day, the answer probably changes. On one day, right, your resilience might come from, going for a walk for 3 miles. Or it might come from a conversation that you had that was uplifting or promising. But I think the thread that runs throughout is basically what we used to call at 85 Broads, for lack of a better term, intestinal fortitude, right? That it just, life today takes enormous guts. And I think the other thing I would say is that 85 Broads was founded and existed for the most part before it became Ellevate, before social media existed. So the type of interchange, of discussion, was typically one-on-one or in a group setting. And again, it was very reminiscent of that yesterday, of these incredible people having these amazing conversations and feeling like you were part of a community that mattered. And I think at the end of the day, the big sort of 30,000-foot aerial view for me is realizing, that you have to choose people, who are going to lift you up, who are going to believe in you, believe in your vision, believe in your mission. And, that becomes, I think, in many, many ways, a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I don't know if that's a really, straightforward answer, but I don't think it's just remembering, to eat a protein bar or, to do yoga. I think it's a state of mind, and an appreciation for the people you have chosen to have in your life. whether that's personally or professionally or both. And for me, the pride that I felt yesterday, not as the founder of 85 Broads, because it's so solidly Ellevate, but I felt like I was part of an extraordinary community of very, very smart people. And I was once again reminded, and I think that women don't hear this enough, because the conversation is so dominated now by men. Just it was a reminder of how incredible women are, how strong they are, how smart they are, how awesome they are. And it's kind of like I need a dose of that every single day. Every single day.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I agree. It was such a great experience. I myself have been for Mobilized Women in person as well as online. And I have to say the energy is amazing, meeting lots of women. And there was opportunity for networking yesterday as well. So if you were there, definitely let us know. It was fabulous. I think when you were talking about your children and one being a solopreneur and the other being a co-founder, I know quite a number of women in our community are solopreneurs as well. So please share in the chat if you've had similar experiences. And in terms of building resilience, two people, like Margie and Christelle, both mentioned that they have a personal advisory board or a board of directors. So basically people that kind of help them move through those times. And that's fabulous advice for anyone at any point in their career. Speaking of boards, coming to a more formal setup for Ellevate or 85 Broads as it was then, what transformed it from being that entity, this idea you had for co-mentoring, into an actual business? What triggered that, and how did that change your approach to the business?
I absolutely love that question. This is where my daughter, I again, if I thought to myself, could this be like a little lab experiment? My daughter never charges enough. She is brilliant, dedicated. She's a perfectionist. She never charges enough. 85 Broads, if you can believe this, for the first 13 years was underwritten by what we fondly referred to as the Bank of Hansen. We had no membership fees. And so can you guys still hear me all right? Good?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we can.
Okay, good. Yeah, good. We had no membership fees. So try to imagine in 2008, you know, all of the funding had come from, as I say, the Bank of Hansen. And then Lehman Brothers also would contribute or hold our events. And then Lehman Brothers went under. So in 2009, right? And you got to remember, not only did Lehman go under, but Jeff had left in 2006. So, I'm thinking to myself, this is very bad. And in 2010, I finally had the guts to ask three people, one, a guy I had worked with at Goldman, who was a partner, and two women who were members of 85 Broads, if they wanted to invest in 85 Broads Unlimited LLC. So we went from me underwriting every penny for 13 straight years, 1997 to 2010, every event, everything that ever happened. And the team, by the way, we at one point, if you can believe this, we had 18 people on the 85 Broads team. In 2010, I said, oh my God, well, everybody's going to quit. We can't go from having been free for 13 years and then suddenly defend, now all of a sudden asking people to pay, right? We should have done it a decade sooner. So that was the real big aha moment. Nobody quit. And we had tiered, membership levels. And we turned, what was starting to look like, the QE2 in the bathtub around. And it was one of the most exhilarating moments of my life, because these three people who invested in me in 85 Broads, that was just enough so that we could create the tech platform that we needed to be able to charge people for membership. And I think, again, that I was so afraid. I was like, well, what if no one likes me? What if everybody quits in droves, right? Isn't that going to be, am I really in a place emotionally where I could handle that, right? Because my whole life was imploding, just completely imploding. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. And it wasn't a giant pity party either, I might add, because basically nobody in 85 Broads, nobody, except a very small handful of people, knew that Jeff had left. Nobody knew that. Right. So I'm continuing to show this happy, face. That's what I'm projecting, and it's all good. But in 2010, when people decided that the value, the return on their investment as members in the network made sense, that was one of the greatest moments of my life.
Fantastic. That's so great to hear. So just for anyone who has questions, by the way, feel free to put it in the chat or raise up your hands. And then you can also ask Jenna directly. But just on that point, I think it's very interesting. You talked about like projecting happiness in that period. And I think it's quite a shift in terms of how leadership was viewed back then versus now. There's a significant emphasis on authenticity and how you show up in front of people. I'm curious, because then obviously it was a very stressful period, I imagine. Were you taking care of yourself? Was self-care practice even a thing back then? Yeah. So now, if you're handling this kind of situation now, what would you do? How would you take care of yourself? Do you have any self-care practices that you recommend?
I think the abundance of information that you can find, some is probably better than others, but the amount of information that is now available to people online is stunning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the focus on just thinking that it's okay to talk about if things aren't okay, that it's okay, to admit things are not okay. I think that for me, it was so important to just continue to create this facade and this trailblazer kind of, because that's who I had been. And it was, and so I think the key thing is, no, back then, even in 2010, or early aughts, it would have been seen as a tremendous weakness. I don't think most HR departments were set up to handle, anybody that had a quote issue, but now, I think that's changed so dramatically. But I think what I would tie it to is, I think this is one of the first times in my life that I've ever really appreciated the power and the importance of community, of real community. And I was so blown away yesterday by people putting themselves out there, right? Not holding anything back, or that's how I perceived what was happening yesterday. And everybody, again, just my impression, being okay with not everybody, thinking this way is north, right? There were so many variations on that theme. And I felt so excited and so happy because not only was it a diverse audience, it was the diversity of thought, of opinion. And I think if I learned anything, and I learned a lot yesterday, the importance of seeking out opinion and advice from people who are coming at it from a different point of view, but doing it in a safe place. And I think the feeling that I had yesterday, which I really thought was extraordinary, I thought those conversations were taking place in a secure, safe environment. And I can't really stress that enough because, what's really happening in the world around us feels beyond scary, beyond unsafe. And the antidote is to make sure that you have, the protection, because that's really in many ways what it is, of a community of people who are going to tell their truth and feel that they're with people who are going to listen and embrace what they have to say, maybe not agree with 100% of what they say, but embrace it as their truth. And I think that where women are at this moment, certainly one of the things that I thought Cole Brower said, which really, really took my breath away, was the importance of using social media as a platform for women to express themselves. And I don't think that's exactly like, new news, but I thought it was an extraordinary moment. One of the things that she said that really, really stuck with me was she does not want to be referred to as a female sailor. She's just a sailor, right? Coco Gauff doesn't want to be referred to as a female tennis player. She's just a tennis player. And it's the same thing. Do you have to call somebody a female entrepreneur? How about just entrepreneur, right? And so I think the exchange of information and ideas yesterday was absolutely extraordinary.
I agree completely. I think exactly your point that diversity of thought is such a huge thing, because you can have a group of people in the room, a lot of them might look alike, but they might have very different opinions about things, different life experiences that influence how they see the world, how they see opportunities. And I think it's such an, I think, underrated life skill to be able to listen to something you don't entirely agree with, but acknowledge that it's someone's reality, someone's truth. So that's an amazing point. And thank you so much for sharing that. So does anyone have questions for Jenna? So I'll officially open the Q&A section. So just please raise up your hand, use the reaction button to raise up your hand if you have any questions. If you don't, I will just keep going. So, so does anyone have a question for Janet? Feel free to just come off mute as well if you have a question. Any questions? I see a little hand raise. Feel free to come off mute if you have a question. So one of the things, so you mentioned Cole, and I thought she was very interesting. So for those who were not able to attend, so Cole is a championship sailor. She's like amazing. She's gone around like the entire world, which is astonishing. And she was very underestimated, I think, because she's like 5'2", which is apparently really small for sailing, apparently. And so, yeah, so I'm curious, what do you typically do when people underestimate you? How do you respond to that?
Well, I can remember when Milestone Capital was first started, one of the guys that I'd worked with at Goldman Sachs said, when we got to 200 million in assets, he said, "Oh, wow, you're not a joke anymore." I thought, oh, okay, well, there you go. And I use that as an example because when you're an entrepreneur, and I'm sure everybody, oh my God, how many variations of this theme? Do people really want you to succeed? Right? And I think, Goldman was very threatened in the early days because it was sort of like I had left the mothership and gone out on my own. Believe me, that was not done back then. In 1993, 1994. No, you didn't sort of say, okay, gee, thanks, this has been real, and then go do your own thing and go up against Goldman. Goldman was then, they would laugh, but they were a competitor, right? So you had Goliath and then you had us. But there were people at Bear Stearns, all they saw was talent. They saw people who had the experience and know-how and knowledge, right? So what Goldman was very derisive about, Bear Stearns said, wow, this is really exciting and we want to be part of this. And I think just even thinking about that right now makes my head explode. Because if the loud voice of Goldman Sachs in my ear had been enough to say, you have no business launching an institutional asset management firm, why do you think you can succeed? Because we're Goldman and you're nobody. If it hadn't been for a handful of people at Bear Stearns saying, wow, that takes a lot of guts to go into that business, and we want to partner with you. So I think the key takeaway there is Goldman was threatened and they were pissed. Bear Stearns said, we've never seen anybody do this. This seems pretty cool. And we would like to figure out a way that we can form a strategic partnership. And when I think about it now, I think about how critically important those handful of people were at Bear Stearns who believed in us. And that was the basis and the reason 85 Broads was founded. Because what we became, the purpose, the mission, the vision, was holy shit. How many women will not, go and rip the cover off the ball, do something extraordinary with their lives because there is not somebody there telling them, you've got this, you can do it. And so, we could have just, Jeff and I could have just said, wow, Milestone Capital, wow, this is really great. And we really showed those assholes at Goldman. Oh, wow. But we didn't, because it was so critically important that the larger, bigger vision was let's use Milestone Capital as the ultimate lab experiment, right? Because what would happen if we said, if we can do it, you can do it, meaning you can do literally anything, right? If you have the right encouragement, if you have the right backing, if you have, people, as we used to say, clapping for you, right? And Margie, I know I drove Margie crazy yesterday because like every couple of minutes when one of the speakers would say something, I would write something in the chat. Like, oh, wow, that was amazing. Oh, I love that. Because I was so excited, and it was that same energy and passion and thrill, right, of being with these extraordinary women. But it's so important. I mean, I would really just, I can't say it enough. I will never say it enough. It'll go on my tombstone, right? Our whole mantra was invest in what you love. And there was such an unbelievable underinvestment in women that we saw an opportunity, you know, to use ourselves as the ultimate way to say we went up against Goliath, and we didn't only survive, we thrived. Whatever it is that you want to do, whatever it is that you want to do, we've got your back. We've got this. And I think that that's very much part of what the Ellevate network is today. And that's why, I'm still so excited and such a fan.
Oh, that is so amazing to hear. And I love that. I love the great points. Like, some will be intimidated. Some will want to partner with you. In the end, you need to work with or hang out with the people that actually support you, that give you that fuel. And that's amazing. We have quite a few hands up now. Starting, I think, Margie, please share your question. Quick question, if you could, please.
So, Janet, no, you didn't drive me crazy because I was putting comments in all day too. But it's interesting listening to you, and then yesterday listening to Jackie Zahner, who has She Money, also a Goldman alum. And it seems that Goldman's attitude launched not only you to build 85 Broads, but Jackie Zahner to launch She Money. Is there anything to that? And are there other alum? I know there are other alum who have spun off and done their own thing.
I think Jackie, it's a great question. I think Jackie, she could just be, floating around the world, on a super yacht, because she and her husband were both partners of the firm when the firm went public in 1999. I don't even want to, it just makes my head spin, right? So Jackie has used her wealth to do extraordinary things. And the basis for that really wasn't Goldman, it was 85 Broads. Because Jackie was one of the first women who joined 85 Broads as a current employee of Goldman Sachs. And that took a lot of guts, because she joined as when she was a partner of the firm, right? And Goldman had this thing of, like, if it was really great, we would have thought of it ourselves and we would have done it ourselves. So it can't be that great. So they were very, again, defensive and threatened by 85 Broads, because women who were currently working for the firm were joining. And so I think that Jackie is a great example of somebody who has really embraced invest in what you love. And in Jackie's case, she has been, for the last 2 decades, a significant investor in women and women-owned businesses.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We have Aida. Is that how you say your name? Please share.
Hi, Ida. Yeah, Janet, thank you so much for sharing. This is my first Ellevate meeting, so this was a very impressive call to join the network on. One question I had was around our own personal motivations, so our own personal objectives, because that's one thing that I have found as well in my career, is that sometimes I have support, but if I'm kind of confused or lack my own clarity, it doesn't really go anywhere. And then when I take the time to find my own motivation, like why I'm doing something or what's important to me, then it's also easier for me to see where advice lands. I'm like, okay, well, does this actually resonate with me in me trying to get to that specific objective? And so, and I found that in like, I made a big career move recently, but I also find it in my day to day as I'm kind of managing my new solopreneurship. It's really kind of important to me to remember what I want as opposed to what is the right thing to do. You know, it's like, what is it that I'm going for? And then when people speak up, it's like, okay, that lands somewhere.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that kind of showed up for you as well.
I think one of the things, and maybe this is not quite, this is a quick thought. It goes back to women feeling that they have the right to create a personal board of directors. And these are people who they have said, it's not like, hey, let's go have lunch and shoot the breeze. Or, hey, do you have a half hour that I could chat with you? No, it is, I need, as an entrepreneur, a personal board of directors, right? Whether that's one person or 3 people or 5, doesn't matter. But it's so critically important to think that you are that important, right? That what you're trying to create as an entrepreneur is worthy of other people's time, intelligence, and input. And I think that if I could go back and do it all over again, all of my advice came from my husband, right? So I didn't really need anybody else because, you know, I had Jeff. And, you know, then when he was no longer in the picture, I got to tell you, I was lost. I was completely and utterly lost on so many levels. It makes my head spin. And so at that point, I was so down and felt so diminished and had absolutely no sense of self-worth that it would have been impossible for me to think that I had the right to ask somebody to advise me, that I needed to have and what I'm talking about here is formal. So it's either a coach, a real coach, or it's people who really, really want you to succeed, right? And that is critical. That's the most critical part here. They want you to succeed, right? So they're in it to win it, meaning that if you succeed, right, then they're going to feel that they were part of that success, that they contributed to your success. But the key thing, I think, is if you don't ask, you don't get. And I think that the one thing that women have to do is think that they have the right to ask, right? The right to say, you know, I want to assemble a group, you know, or 1 or 2 people to formally and officially advise me. And whether you do that, you know, again, through a professional coach, an executive coach, whatever it is, or somebody who's going to advise on your particular business, or in your business that you actually have a real advisory board, right? I think that women just so undervalue their own specialness, right? And what I felt yesterday was that for a whole day, I had people who were the top in their field advising me. And it's a feeling that I'm really struggling with today because I don't want to let it go.
That's amazing. And I love that point. I think it's very important that we know we are important enough to advocate for ourselves. Because I see women do this all the time. We will advocate for our siblings, for our parents, for our relatives, ourselves. So yeah, so I think that's an excellent point. Just we are at the top of the hour. Just a reminder that we have our connections meeting in about 2 weeks, so on June 20th. So please sign up for that. It's in the chat. Janet, I don't want to impose on your time. We have a few hands up still. I don't know if you can stay for a few additional minutes.
Sure, I'm happy to.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For anyone who has to run, that's all right. But for those who have their hands up, we're so happy to have you here. Courtney, if you'd like to share your question.
Great. Hi, everyone. Hi, Janet. Excuse me. First of all, Janet, I had not heard your story, so I so appreciate you sharing it and hearing it from you as opposed to reading it, which I've probably read it before. Really inspiring, really powerful. I also appreciate, because I am one of many fantastic coaches on this Zoom call today. And I am trained and I am certified, and I've been doing this for 20 years. Just those comments honestly help to inspire me and validate me. So I appreciate that very much. My question is, I was reading an article the other day about another women's group. I will give the short version, who basically got sued by a men's rights group for not allowing men in, and ended up having to settle and create a crowd fund and all of this. And I just was curious to know, did you experience that type of thing? Have you? What do you think about this concept of they're basically using laws that are designed to protect minorities and women against women's groups to be able to say, we're going to shut you down? So I know you talked a lot about all the kind of rub up against and challenge you had in lots of different ways, but I was curious as to your thoughts about this, or if you had any experience in that way.
It's a great question. And congratulations on your business.
Thank you.
The importance of what you do and the people that you help and coach. This is a pretty easy one. In today's climate, milestone capital could not exist. Or if it was on the drawing board and we were 6 months away from launching, we would look like, NASA, at T-10, at T-2, we would have shut the engines down. Until there is clarity around this, what is about to happen or potentially can happen, if all of this ends up in the Supreme Court, it just absolutely makes my head explode. But having said that, I thought one of the things that was so validating about the summit was women have got to join ranks. And I swear, I was really never really afraid of anything, because I had this posse. I had this group of women, right, all over the world. And I felt, I felt like I had superhuman strength, because I derived so much strength from these other very courageous women. And back then, things were actually really going quite well. I mean, Roe v. Wade was still the things were improving from a business standpoint for women and minorities, big time. When I read a month or so ago that Goldman Sachs is now no longer having events for women or minorities, that means that they are afraid of who potentially occupies 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue come, next January. And I think that this is a moment in time where and this is a very interesting question that you asked, and it's obviously very timely and was touched upon yesterday. But this whole concept, again, which came up late in the day, about men being allies if there are men who passionately believe in what you do, in your mission, and, they're willing to back, right? And draw on their own networks, leverage their networks to advance more women, then to me, that's the way to go. I think in the climate that we find ourselves right now, I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime, not in my whole lifetime. So I think this is very definitely a moment where women are going to have to figure out who to sort of join ranks with. And I know that probably sounds kind of like an airy concept. But I think, I felt sort of the little bit of love yesterday from Accenture. I thought about the companies that did sponsor the Mobilize Women's Summit. And it goes back to, we created something called the boycott. In 2004, I was on every cable and news channel on one day in 2004, where we told the members of 85 Broads not to buy anything for one day, so that companies would appreciate what women bring to their bottom line. It was unbelievable. And I think this is another one of those moments where women have got to say, okay, who's with us? Who's with us, right? And who is not so afraid? And I think about, again, would I have given Accenture a shout out, a year ago or 2 years ago, 5 years? No. But I think it takes guts in the climate that we find ourselves in politically and socially, culturally today. And I think the whole idea of rewarding people and companies who are going to take a courageous stand, on behalf of women, there's going to have to be some way, that they believe that women actually appreciate, care, and know, that they're out there, still fighting the fight. I don't know how many really are, or how many will be left. I think again, it comes down to mobilize. Can't say it enough.
Act.
Yeah.
Act. We did, if I might just add in, we did have a couple of allies for any of those of you who were on in the morning yesterday. We had 2 males who joined in on the DEI conversation, and we were very happy to have them. But when you talk about membership for males, Janet, we had a membership for our allies way back in the day. Janet put that together, and quite frankly, we've discussed it for now. Not a membership that allows them to come in our most private conversations, but something that would help them be involved and have an allyship. And I talked to somebody the other day, and it's what we used to have in fraternities, where they had little sisters. Well, maybe we'll bring on have our brothers. But we do not shut out male allies. And yes, are we affected by what's happening monetarily and in every other way? Absolutely. Just like every other minority women's any type of organization that is focused on one segment of our population.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Margie. We look forward to seeing the developments in that area. I would just like to, we have two people left, Gabriella and Sarah. I'd appreciate if there were very quick questions, if you could take them one after the other so that we don't impose further on Janet's time, if you could, please. Gabriella, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I almost lowered my hand, but then I realized, so Janet, thank you for sharing with us your experience. So I love the magnitude and the magnitude and the scale of the problems that and the issues we tackle in these forums. I will actually go a little bit personal. So you express how many tough times you had. I want my question for you was, how did you go? You said you had support, but in yourself inside, have you been ever so low that you wanted to quit? And what was like how did you pass those times if you had them?
Certainly in 2009, I didn't. I was at such a low point personally and professionally because, you know, 85 Broads, you know, again, had all, the Bank of Hansen had paid for all of that. And so we were at a point where, when I say we, the collective we, you know, at a point where I was faced with having to shut the network down. And I came this close. And I thought to myself at that moment, unless I try everything before I get to that conclusion. And I hadn't tried everything, but I was, this is where people have to be careful, really, really careful. And this is again where you have to have people who you can trust and you know, who really want you to succeed at the beginning of the day, at the middle of the day, and at the end of the day. They're there for you. They're in your corner. And I finally said, I have to ask these three people to step in. I don't know what I would have done if they hadn't, but it was just enough to breathe a little, you know, air back into 85 Broads. Those three people said, we've got this.
Excellent, thank you.
And we've got you. We've got you. And so it was the first time in 4 years that I had gotten up just for a split second, the guts, the nerve to ask, you know, can you guys see yourself investing in 85 Broads? Because my only other alternative, I cannot fund this network another day. And I'm talking about millions of my own personal wealth was what had gone into 85 Broads. And that was why, pretty much was the single biggest reason why Jeff left. He was like, this has to stop. No, it's not going to stop. Okay, well then, see ya. So that was and it's so that the great irony is that milestone, the term milestone, if you look up the definition in the dictionary, not only means that you succeeded, it also means turning point. And 2010, those three people getting behind 85 Broads, not wanting to see it go down, not wanting to see it fail, was literally what kept the lights on and kept me going.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
much. Sarah, rounding question.
Yeah, I'm the last one. My name is Sarah Minsteris, and when I saw that Janet is speaking, I really jumped on the call because I don't know, Janet, if you remember me, but I was in Lehman Brothers that Joe Gregory brought you there.
Yes,
Yeah. And I was in technology doing systems for trading floor. I had double sword everywhere. Where man, I was only one. I am 5 foot tall.
yep.
With an accent, short woman, a mother of 2 also with an accent. And I don't need to tell you anything more about that. And then you came in and then we created Will, if you remember. Women
That's right.
Initiative
That's
Leading
right.
Women, yeah. And then we went to 85 Broad. And I only don't want to waste your time, but this is the first time I have opportunity to tell you. I left Lehman 2 years after they bankrupt in 2010. And now I am a coach, I am entrepreneur. And I am so glad for all these women who are there to tell you that you are part, doing that, what you did in Lehman, what you brought up. And I realized, I was like somewhere very, we say we have to break the ceiling. I was very down. And I worked for Lehman Brothers for 19 years. When I left, I was above the ceiling. I was a senior vice president, and I'm now a coach. And I am thank you very much that people like you at this time, when it was forbidden to talk about, and I was in the in the meetings, what it was all men, and I come in this senior vice president, and they assume that I am administrative assistant, because it's like officially, like, we introduce everybody and they forgot about me. And I was so angry, and somebody was asking, what you doing this time? You have to open your mouth. And I thought, no, you didn't ask everybody to introduce. You didn't ask me to introduce myself. And speaker was kind of like embarrassed. And I turned around and told my boss's boss, I told, this is what happened when you have only one woman in the room. And this is like kind of gave me the opportunity to move on and do whatever I do. Thank you
Well,
very much.
I gotta tell you something, and we can end on this note because I think this is really so critically important. What you've just said is so critically important. I never would have been at Lehman Brothers had it not been for Joe Gregory, who was a visionary. And
Yes.
Joe Gregory should have stepped down as the president and chief operating officer and just become head of human resources, because Joe spent all of his time on social issues, on things he wanted Lehman Brothers to be the best firm for everybody. That was not a popular sentiment.
Yeah.
Right? So I found a guy who he lived and breathed, right? That Lehman Brothers was going to differentiate itself. It was going to attract the best talent because it was the best firm for everybody.
Yeah.
And he in that period of time had such a huge impact. But if it had not been for Joe, Will, Women's Initiative leading Lehman, all those things never would have happened. Never would have happened. So there's a guy who is in a position of tremendous authority, making decisions that impacted every woman at that firm.
Yes.
And so that again, I think speaks to, I'll just end here by saying it speaks to the importance of strategic alliances, of aligning yourself, with people who share your vision of inclusion, right? And diversity of opinion and thought. And also, I think most importantly, just really recognize that extraordinary talent is not a male only domain.
Exactly.
So there you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
I'm so happy. I'm so happy seeing you. I didn't
Oh,
see you since
ditto.
my 2010. I think.
That's so great.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Thank you.
I love Thank you so much. We've learned so much today. I mean, so much value. Janet, you've been so generous with your time. We've talked about allyship, about learning to ask for ourselves. We've heard your story, your experiences, and how it made you who you are, how it influences the choices you make, how you advise your kids. And so we are really, really grateful for all of this. So I just want to end 30 seconds. A question from Eleanor. What do you envision for the future of Ellevate?
Big things. Allie McDonald, who is sort of the big head poobah at Ellevate, got on a plane right after the summit yesterday to fly out to Salt Lake City to go to Jackie's She Money Summit, which is happening out there today. Ellevate is in my humble opinion, is going to be one of the most important women's networks now, 6 months from now, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years from now. The importance of women, you know, really feeling this, the strength of the quote sisterhood, as it were, is gonna become increasingly important. And I think because Ellevate has done a great job, you know, of continuing to be a platform for brilliant women. I would like to see 85 Broads, Ellevate, become much more global, much more global. So if I had, you know, any advice from the cheap seats, it would certainly be, you know, to create, to bring Ellevate back to its 85 Broads, much more global reach, which I think is important, because I think what can happen, it's almost like you can be like in a bubble. You know, Americans think, well, you know, if it's happening here, it's important. If it's happening someplace else, well, maybe it's less important. That's what really was the secret sauce of 85 Broads, was not only diversity of opinion, you know, from the standpoint of where you worked or what you did, but where you were geographically. And it was the global aspect of 85 Broads that made it an absolute powerhouse, because our reach, you know, outside of the US and what that fed back into the US is really what made, I think, I really to this day believe that some of the greatest things that ever happened, some of the greatest ideas that were ever created, came from women outside of this country. And we learned so much. And I would just say, you know, the greatest, you know, joy of my life was writing the first chapter for More Than 85 Broads. And all the other chapters are stories of women from, you know, all different parts of the network. It's an extraordinary book. And there are so many voices of women who are in that book who were not citizens of the United States. And that's what gives it its power and, quite frankly, its beauty. So that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Janet. You have been beyond generous with your time, and I'm sure all of us appreciate it. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for being here. Thank you. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.